Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for what we all know is going to be a critical and courageous conversation. And before we begin with introductions, I want to just say thank you so much to my co-hosts and founders of Fostering Quality Schools. I am joined by Melissa Lambert and Joseph Sansone, who have been involved, Sassone, I'm sorry, I'm mispronounced that, have been involved in this work for many, many years. And I'm just so excited to be involved in this conversation tonight. So before we get started, I do want to acknowledge the teachers and leaders who are on the call who have been involved with communities that struggle for many, many years. And we all know that that is extraordinarily rewarding work, and it's also very challenging work. So tonight is the first of what we hope to be several sessions where we talk about what's really happening in terms of engaging students and engaging families. And certainly the pandemic has had an impact on us all. So we're here to support you. We're here to talk about what's working, what's not, and what are some tools that are necessary that we can put into place to help us all move forward collectively. We have representatives tonight from the New York State Latino administrators and superintendents, Nassau. We have LILTA, Long Island Latino Teachers Association, represented, and the Nassau County Alliance of Black School Educators. Once again, thank you all for engaging with us for the start of this conversation. I'm going to hand it over now to my co-host, Melissa Lambert, so that she can introduce herself, and then to Joe. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Melissa,
thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Great introduction. Thank you very much.
Joe, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Great. Yep. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay.
So welcome, everyone. When you get a chance.
Okay, great. I wanted to give you an opportunity.
Head over to the chat and tell us where you're coming from and where you are right now. We are coming to you from New York to let you know that we're here in a couple of different ways, just to really hear about how things are going and really think about some of the big challenges and important ways that we are working together to network and address some of these challenges for our most vulnerable populations and students. So we thank you for your time being here. I'm Melissa Lambert with Fostering Quality Schools. I have been a high school principal, a district administrator in large urban districts, as well as small rural ones. So I have a unique perspective and definitely all along the way take into account how to specifically attend to our multilingual learners and culturally and linguistically diverse families. So thank you for being here. I'll hand it to Joe, and then Joe can hand it to Mark and the rest of the team to introduce themselves. Thanks.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I actually grew up on Long Island. I grew up in Huntington, and I worked in the Northport, East Northport School District. I was administrator in the Kings Park Central School District. Then I moved. I made a big move to Arizona, and I was an assistant superintendent in Tucson, Arizona, in a pretty rapidly growing school district. And then I took, from there, I took another job with a nonprofit, and I worked with underperforming schools and districts across the country. I had a large team, and we worked in very diverse areas. I did that for the last 15 years before starting Fostering Quality Schools. So, the impact of this crisis on all students, I know, is significant. Especially for teachers and school leaders and families. And as schools resume instruction, this coming year, not only will they need to address social and emotional needs, the toll of the crisis is really impacting children and families. And also widespread is our concern for unfinished learning and learning losses sustained in the wake of school closures. So we really thank you, everybody, for coming on and just sharing your experience. And, school leaders, this is a time where I know you might be feeling alone, and it's really, we believe that you deserve support. So we want to put these on so everyone can have a shared experience and just learn from one another. So I'd just like to introduce Dr. Mark Blitz. Mark, just so you know, you're on mute right now, but I will have a quick introduction, Mark.
All right, thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. I will give a quick introduction. I am Mark Blitz. I'm the project director for the Comprehensive Assessment of Leadership for Learning, or CALL, which I'll be happy to tell you more about later in our meeting today. And I'm coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin, and happy that we're all from various parts of the country here tonight to talk, to learn from a panel of experts here about leading in really a crisis situation. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to telling you about CALL, which very briefly is a leadership assessment tool for school improvement. So thanks for joining, and looking forward to chatting with you some more.
Wonderful. We'd like to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves as well now. So first, I'd like to welcome and thank Dafny Irizarry for joining us this evening. And Dafny is from the Long Island Latino Teachers Association. Many of you on the call tonight know Dafny and all of her dedication and hard work over the years. And certainly with Latino and immigrant students. So welcome to you, Dafny. If you would please introduce yourself.
Dafny, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Dafny. Here we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Henriquez, and for putting this together and for inviting me on behalf of the Long Island Latino Teachers Association. We are a group of educators here on Long Island, Nassau, and Suffolk County, committed to increasing graduation rates, higher education enrollment, retention and completion among underrepresented students. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to pick it up. I think we lost you a little bit, Aurelia. Dr. Rivers, if you could introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Nichelle Rivers. I am the president of the Nassau County Alliance of Black School Educators. So happy to be here with you all tonight. What we do is we advocate for the lack of hiring of diverse staff in Nassau County. You know, there was a report done by Hofstra University last year, and it really illuminated the widening gap as it exists with the lack of hiring of administrators and teachers of color, as Dafny knows very well. And so our organization works to provide the necessary support, helping people with their resume and trying to connect them with assistant superintendents of HR to try to get them in the door so that they can get at the table and have those conversations and stay in different school districts. So that's what we're about. And I'm happy to be here tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. Can everyone hear me okay now? Great. I would like to introduce Dr. Alex Marrero, and Alex is the Interim Superintendent of New Rochelle. And Alex is my hermano, who is part of Nassau, and we are a group of Latino administrators and superintendents. So welcome to you, Alex, and thank you for joining us this evening. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Henriquez. And yes, also in addition to the New York sector, I'm representing the National ALAS organization, the Association for Latino Administrators and Superintendents. I serve as their treasurer on their executive board. In the capacity of, I'm not going to say day job, because if we look outside, you know it's not day. The office that I'm sitting in, yes, is in the interim role of the City School District of New Rochelle as the interim superintendent, and excited in this unprecedented year, and can't wait to share the successes, but also put out the challenges that we're facing, because I know that we'll have some answers or maybe some guiding points. Excited to hear Dr. Rivers, what you and Ms. Irizarry about, because I am, and just like Dr. Henriquez, personify the 1% and sometimes even less than 2% nationally of administrators of color who are doing the job well, but we need to work on changing those statistics. So I want to connect with you all as panelists, but also everybody in attendance, because it's something that I believe in. And what we're going to speak about today is what I devoted many years of research to in terms of engaging our community, specifically our key stakeholders, which are our parents. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Okay, so Melissa, if it's okay with you, I think we'll begin to talk about what's happening in each individual district. So
Perfect.
if you'd like to take over.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. So one of the first questions that we wanted to ask panelists is, you had a plan, you planned all summer long, you've been working with families, you've been working with administrators, you've been working to really bolster the experience for students in this new way of educating our students. And then the fall started. How are you doing now?
I'll start.
Okay.
I'm an educator. I've been an educator a teacher for 26 years, but I like to speak on behalf of the Long Island Latino Teachers Association. So one thing we realized, especially when schools closed back in March, was that the essential key to help students and their families was communication, communication, communication. So we understand that we educators are providers of educational services, and our students and families are the consumers of those educational services. And when the COVID hit, we realized that we needed to review, expand, and improve our communication with the families and with the students. The fact that a lot of our English language learners' families are not familiar with the school system or do not speak English yet had a tremendous impact in that communication. So we had to be mindful of that. In addition, a lot of our students did not have access to technology or to the internet. And this magnified the digital and language divide that we already, in normal times were experiencing. So it was very challenging. It continues to be very challenging. As an organization, we developed a number of actions and initiatives over the summer, from webinars to parents, webinars to educators, youth programs online, to try to have that communication and that support to our students and families. But it continues to be challenging in many ways.
I'll jump in there. We're doing okay. I mean, we as Daphne just indicated, there are a lot of challenges, and what we're trying to do is make sure that that we're being cognizant of race, gender, ability, and class, and how all of that intersects and really impacts the remote learning that some of our students are doing. We have a remote model. We have a model where students are coming in every other day. And the Nassau County Alliance of Black School Educators is really going to be focusing on working with parents so that we could help them with unpacking the intersectionality as it relates to race, class, gender, the abilities of children, and how that impacts the dynamics of what is happening in some of the homes with our students, and how that impacts the educational environment. Some of our students are not in safe environments. They're not in environments where, it's quiet and they could get a education that, they will be getting in a normal classroom. But the dynamics are just different. And so all those things have to come into play, and really getting our teachers to understand that, they can't victimize our students just because they're victims of circumstance, and really getting them to understand that when students are in an environment, like one of our students yesterday was in music class, but she was walking with her grandfather. She was under the care of her grandfather. So that student can't be penalized because, she's not in a location where she can get her education. She was still participating. She was still walking down the street with her grandfather, but she was still able to participate. So not viewing that as a punitive thing, and working with families to understand all the different variables that impact how our students are able to learn and grow.
Right, and just to go along with that, working with our teachers and leaders so that we truly look at learning differently, and we're able to meet children where they're at. So that's not seen as a behavior that, a student should be penalized for. Understanding cultural responsiveness in this, I think, is just so critical. So that's an excellent point. Dr. Marrero, did you want to add
Absolutely,
to that?
I do. So just to take a stroll back to March, New Rochelle was the epicenter, right? So we had to react, and that's the best way to say it. We were forced, like everyone else, to react. A whole lot of planning has happened since then. We came up after we were forced to shut down in terms of our containment area. We came up with the PrEP plan, prevention, responsiveness, education, physical spaces. That morphed into what we call distance learning, then distance learning 2.0, then the new rock and rolling plan, which addressed the health, the academics, the social, emotional, the culture, and of course the community, finance, and operations. In terms of the challenge is exactly that we have planned throughout the entire time. And for some who aren't involved with, and it's everybody is involved in stakeholders, but it's easy to point the finger, and I'm speaking on behalf of New Rochelle and everyone. The plan is always morphing because we're learning. So the concept of flying the plane while we're building it, I say that we're learning, we're getting guidance, and we're incorporating it into the plan. And as a result, we're making shifts. That's the largest challenge. And in terms of where we are now is maintaining some sense of what we're going to call normalcy now that we've engaged in hybrid. So we have yet to bring all students in. Next week, Monday, we're bringing 7th grade in. And the following Monday, we're bringing 9 through 12 in, of course, in cohorts. And then we'll say that everybody's had the opportunity to engage in person. Aside from just managing day-to-day and making sure that we respond accordingly to the health concerns of our staff and students, is also looking at how many students, as mentioned with the other panelists, are choosing to go virtual and why. Is it because of a health concern? Terrific. If that's the case, that's their option and we support it. Or is it because of other obstacles? A quick analysis that we've done, that there's a certain population, certain part of town, certain demographic, certain subgroup of students who've chosen to stay remote. So I don't think that's by coincidence, right? So we're looking at the students who are ENL, students who may be special needs, students who identify as African-American or Latinx in a certain part of town. So digging into that is where the work behind the scenes, so we can make an informed decision to address what we've mentioned already in terms of expanding that divide in terms of the achievement. Yeah, big challenge.
It's so great the way that. Go ahead, Aurelia.
I'm sorry. I think what I'm saying is delayed.
There's a little bit of an echo, unfortunately.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I imagine all of you have experienced students who've fallen off the map, if you will. And I wanted you talk a little bit about that. And you know, I know a lot of you on the call know me and know that I spent 23 years in the Brentwood School District, 23 very rewarding years. But we know how difficult it is for many students to feel connected to school and to really engage our children and our parents. So I wanted to know more about those students. And if any of you have implemented a plan to monitor those children and how that's working.
So I'm in a new role. I'm the director of fine performing arts in my school district, and I'm super excited about leaving the grant box and going into this other box as a practicing visual artist. I think it's important. And so what we've been trying to emphasize with our teachers is this emphasis on play and really getting students engaged to help support them through a very social and emotional lens. So we start out with having the students do a writing prompt to respond to something having to do with either COVID or just to do a check-in to see how they're doing. Those students that we're finding it hard that they may come to school on the alternate days, but they're not logging in when it comes to the remote instruction. We're following up with those students. We're logging our contacts with the parents, the phone calls, the emails, and really trying to be intentional. We're collaborating with the social workers and school psychologists, just to really make sure that we're addressing the whole child. And so we're trying to make sure that we're being intentional about that work. And so that's something that we think that as long as we make this a habit and it continues to be, a habit, that I think we're going to, break down some doors and get more students coming when it comes to the remote part of them coming to school.
If I can jump in there, I want to highlight some of the work that specific schools, as a former principal, I love having building level decisions and principal autonomy. A couple of our schools have taken on this troubleshooting database, nothing sophisticated, right? But it's the approach and the intentionality and the collaboration, which I want to highlight. It's a spreadsheet, like if you will open up any spreadsheet, but it's the columns, that reflect how they've aggressively addressed the needs of students. So the columns from the name and identifying the support services needed for these students. Do they have access to tech? Yes. Do they have access to connectivity? Yes. Have they completed any work in the last 48 hours? No. Yes. And then there's an action plan attached to it. The ability to communicate as educators with the parents. And if the answer is no, immediate comments, and then a release of a visit to home. So we have tiered approach. So once we have a student who's disengaged, we've also changed the way that we take attendance, right? So we've changed it to engaged, disengaged. 3 disengagements pays you a visit. So that's on the practical piece. In terms of the connection as a leader, right? So that's what's happening at the building level. On the district level, I think the approach is not losing that personal touch, although that we're hybrid and virtual. I've engaged in quite a bit of town halls. Our board meetings have become more of a question and answer as opposed to just public comment, because that is serving as a vehicle for communication, two-way communication. And in spite of the pandemic, with a mask covering the smiles, myself and other community members have walked through the neighborhoods after hours so we can engage with students to get real-time feedback. That's proven to be invaluable because it goes against what we're putting in terms of a product and service in terms of school, i.e. hybrid and virtual, when they actually get to see someone and although 6 feet apart, we get to interact. So practically, the troubleshooting website, more as a district level initiative, really not losing that one-on-one or small group connection.
That's awesome. That in-person, we all know that in-person piece is critical. Thank you all. That's excellent. I know that we wanted to talk about student engagement next. Ms. Lambert, are we ready?
Yes, absolutely. So leaders, we've heard that many colleagues around the nation, and you've touched on this a little bit already, are having a challenge keeping learners engaged online. And so we wanted to hear about some of the ways that you have been working with that specific topic. And then I have a follow-up question, but I'll wait for that.
Mrs. Irizarry?
Yes. I'm sorry, I was muted before. I wanted to share with you that, yes, collecting data in terms of reaching out to students and families, extremely important. I know a lot of school districts, have robocalls in English and Spanish and Haitian Creole, and they're very helpful, but nothing equates to a phone call from a teacher to check on the family or the students. That has been the most reliable and effective tool for me as a teacher of high school students, and for me also as a leader to take the time every day. I have a list of 3-4 students that I'm going to touch base with them and their families. And obviously, those first questions about how you're doing, how's your family doing, your well-being, not did you do the homework, did you hand it in, did you, upload it, the answer, etc. So that's very crucial. And that leads to your question, obviously, about student engagement. It is important that, yes, our students learn and complete their work, but if their health and their food needs and all those needs are not addressed, learning is not going to take place. So during the summer, I had to keep in touch with a lot of my students, and what I found was when I called to see if they had a laptop or if they were doing some reading, etc., some of them were sick or their relatives were sick. So obviously the priority of getting tested, making sure they had food and they had access, Wi-Fi access, etc., became a priority. And I think as educators, that is something we need to keep in mind, that achievement is important, but it won't take place without the other components. Also to keep them engaged. When I teach every morning, we begin by asking 2 questions. One is, how are you doing right now? And another question that has to do with the social emotional learning, whether it's what are you grateful for today? We talk about responsibility. What's one thing I can do to show responsibility? So every day we have an additional question. How am I going to spend the holidays, etc.? And that keeps students engaged. And after we get through those conversations at the beginning of the lesson, much easier for them to be receptive to whatever the lesson is. So
I like to add, I mentioned the troubleshooting worksheet, which has really, the troubleshooting approach has helped tremendously in addressing all needs. But specifically with our most vulnerable population, from the onset, we did whatever we needed to do to ensure that we became, like that, a one-to-one district in terms of technology. So not just our most vulnerable, all students had the option to say, yes, I will take this Chromebook. In addition to that, we made sure that access was not a barrier in terms of connectivity. So we, as a district, were able to allot and purchase, but also collaborating with our city development, our mayor's office, and our library to make sure that we had enough MiFi units. And that was where we got creative in our distribution. So we looked at, we developed a formula rather, in which the students who had, free and reduced lunch, also who've been disengaged as of the spring, and we gave them weights, and then we really just distributed to each site based on that magic number. And then we had the principal, okay, you've been allotted 102 based on this formula. Now you give it to the right 102. And we've had 95% plus participation rate back to our engagement attendance tracking system because of that. Before we engaged in hybrid, we also allowed for virtual hubs at all 10 of our schools, plus one of our community partners in the Lincoln area, for those who are familiar with New Rochelle. And that offered the opportunity for students who had less than ideal learning environments at home to go to a place which is the safe haven of the school. So that's how we got rid of the barriers. But in terms of also being informed, I have a student council that really tells me what I need to know, whether we can go virtual or not. We have restorative circles that happens through the Office of Pupil Personnel, in which our community and students engage. And leveraging our councils. Our PTA council has been incredible, and our SEPTA, for those of us who are not familiar, our special ed PTA has been invaluable informers as well in terms of decisions we've made.
May I just jump in for a second? And Dr. Marrero, you read my mind. I was texting Melissa about our exceptionally abled students, our special needs students. And, you know, I think a lot of times in these conversations, we overlook the needs of that community. And I think it's really important tonight that we hear from you specifically about those students and those families. Did you hear me on that one?
Yeah, I think so. I'll jump in. I wanted to touch a little bit on the engagement, and then I'll get into what you just asked about. So we have, similar to what Dr. Marrero mentioned, we have these hubs in our schools where students can just go and pick up a device and go to their classroom with the device to use it in the classroom. Our teachers are being really, really creative. They're using Pear Deck and all of these phenomenal apps to really keep our students engaged. One is Flipgrid that allows our students to, you know, record video. We're doing scavenger hunts with them. One of our schools, we have a guest speaker every Friday for remote students. I'm scheduled to be a guest speaker tomorrow, so I have this super cool costume and my puppet that I'm going to go with tomorrow. And so those are some of the things that we're doing to try to keep the students engaged, having surprise guest speakers come out, having them showcase themselves and their talents via Flipgrid, really trying to close that digital divide by incorporating different online platforms to engage the students through different means, creating their own those avatars. So our students are creating their avatars. And so we're trying to be as creative as possible. We have some teachers that are that have implemented meditation in their classroom, and that's a daily thing where the students are learning how to meditate and really taking the time to address that mindfulness aspect. In terms of students with abilities, whether it be special education students or the gifted population, we have a stellar program that allows our students to really engage in enrichment activities outside of the classroom. And we have our a really, I think, a phenomenal special education program where our SEPTA is really active in our school district, and our PTA is active as well. And so they've been coming in, working with our teachers to enhance that collaboration and building capacity and building community to keep our students and families engaged in coming to school, as well as developing those habits of mind where they understand how to think cognitively and at higher levels to really own their own learning in the classroom.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that, in particular about our students with special needs and that community, and how the pandemic has challenged us, what may be working? Any outstanding questions?
I would like to add also, you know, that from what I've seen in some school districts, having a direct line for Spanish-speaking parents of students who have disabilities or are just English language learners or might be in the general program, but the parents themselves are not English speakers yet. Having that direct line has become very effective to keep that communication and that engagement, rather than having to call the district and press such number if you want Spanish, but to know that there is an assigned person, perhaps a community liaison, who directly is going to answer questions and provide information to parents. Also, that helps the district collect data about what's going on and what kind of questions and concerns the community is having, and to use that line also to provide wraparound services that families and students might need, and that those services might be interfering with the learning. So from what I see, not where I work, but in many school districts that I have read about and have colleagues who work, have shared the effectiveness of having that direct Spanish line.
100%. Thank you, Daphne.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to just add, in terms of our prioritization, the plans, as I mentioned, being so fluid, we were forced to delay our reentries just in totality. So we had our phase 1, 2, 3. We're clearly embarking in our 3rd and 4th, as I mentioned earlier. But pre-phase, when we looked at our most vulnerable students and those who have physical disabilities, who a virtual learning environment is just not possible. We made every effort to make sure that those students had access to the buildings. And it was no easy task. It required quite a bit of training, support for our teaching staff to feel comfortable, but we had a successful pre-launch to our phases. So that was just a direct approach. SEPTA was incredibly supportive in that endeavor.
Thank you. Excellent. Does anyone want to talk a little bit about formative assessment, or what types of strategies you may be using to see if our students in fact are getting the high quality instruction that we aim to give them? Is there anything in place in your districts that you'd like to speak about? I know we're all interested in hearing those answers.
Yes, I'm interested in hearing those answers. That's something that we haven't embarked on. So I'll say quickly where we are. What we have done, again, the keyword plan. This is going to be the toughest part of this in terms of really gauging and taking a pulse of where our students are. We've heard about, we know about the summer slide, now the spring summer slide, and I'm sure everybody's heard about the COVID slide. We don't know where our students are, and that's the toughest place to be as the business of education that we're in. We have yet to launch our interim assessments. However, in the first week and the second week of November, we will be administering our interim assessments, formative assessments. The hurdle that we encountered is test sophistication and also focusing on testing expectations, since we've come to the realization that the testing will happen at home, right? So in terms of it being valid and reliable, making sure that we have digital citizenship and the honor code in place, because we want it to be valid data. But we have yet to embark. I'm curious to see if our panelists have, or anybody in the comments, because I want to learn from you all as well.
So what we're doing is we're really concentrating on project-based assessments, and really getting our students to be able to articulate their own ideas, be creative and innovative, really work on their presentation skills. We test students, we test students, but it's more important for our students to really develop those skills that they're going to need beyond middle school, beyond high school. And so we're starting that at the elementary level and really getting our teachers to understand what project-based assessments look like, what they are, and how we can implement that in our classrooms. We partner with the Buck Institute, and all of our teachers are going through the training to really understand how to integrate that into their instruction, and how to integrate that into the assessments, so that they see assessments through a different lens. We're gathering data from students where they're working on unpacking those standards and identifying those power standards, what those standards are that we want those students to know and be able to do once they leave that grade. And so we align that with a project that really showcases their talents outside of a test.
Wonderful. And, the other day, someone had mentioned to me, if anything, has any good come out of this pandemic? And one of the things that has been mentioned time and time again is that it's really forcing all of us to look at differentiation, if nothing else, and really learn about that. And as Dr. Rivers just said, looking at assessment and education as a whole through a very, very different lens now. And although we like to use the term, new normal, much of it does seem like it's here to stay for quite some time. So, so thank you for that. And I put a comment in, project-based, I love it. It's the way to go. For those of us parents of young children, we know how critical that is and how they learn tremendously through those experiences. So thank you. I think we're getting to that time now, Melissa.
Great.
For,
Fabulous.
Dr. Blitz as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and before we pivot and talk a little bit more about...
All right, so we have the...
Whoops. Oh, it must be delayed. Hold on one second. Okay, so before we pivot over to Mark to talk a little bit about some of the options you have to really think about where we are now, right? It was so interesting to hear you say that, Dr. Marrero, where it's like, wait, where are we right now? It's really one of the first points we get to pause and think about, okay, we're moving forward. It's a new way of learning. We have to adjust. We have to be able to pivot when necessary. But I really want to just really validate everything that everybody said, particularly around the student agency component, that everybody here on the call is really giving that option of student agency and helping families and caregivers to be a part in that, right? I just keep hearing that they're really co-designers in the way that we're moving forward. So our families and caregivers are part of this, this journey, that we engage with them, that we really have an opportunity to help look at education in a new way. And so that just such novel and important ideas that are coming from each of you. So thank you so much for sharing those. And I think you're right, Aurelia, this is like the beginning of a series, because there are so many ideas that are already coming out of this that we want to see. And some of the resources that we'll be sending after this totally align and resonate with what you're saying. So post-webinar, you're also going to get some really great materials. So now I want to kick it over to Dr. Blitz. He's amazing and has a brief overview of a tool that we wanted to share that really helps tie a lot of this together. So I will go ahead and share with you.
All right, thank you. Again, I want to thank you all for letting me join this panel. It really is an honor. I really am, and I hope this comes off as genuine. I'm really overwhelmed by hearing these stories and what these school leaders are doing. It's incredible, really, to hear from these leaders. It gives me hope that we're going to get through all this, and our students are actually going to be stronger on the other side of this crisis. It's, with everything going on, it's just good to hear the positive stories that are happening. It's also wonderful to hear the kind of adaptations that have been made in the remote teaching and learning, like project-based learning and assessment that we were just heard about. And I hope that some of those innovative practices will stick when we go back to the old normal, if we ever get there. And really listening to everybody, to me, it really goes to show the importance of leadership. We talk about leadership a lot, and it's not just something to talk about. I think what we've seen over the past year, that in organizations, businesses, governments, and schools, really, that you can get by with ineffective leadership if you have a strong workforce or staff But when a crisis hits, we really do see the immediate impact of failed leadership. And leadership does matter. And I think these school leaders have shown that here with the work they've done. You know, and the last thing I want to say before I get into my work, because I just had to share these things when listening to everybody. We see that, you know, with teachers and school leaders, you know, they are professionals, and they've been prepared to adapt to the multiple crises that we're facing, and that the nature of the education profession requires adaptability. You know, as a teacher, as a school leader, you know, you don't know what to expect when you walk into a school building each day. You think, you know, you might have your plans together, but you really don't know what's going to happen each day when you walk into the building, or in this case, when you log on to Zoom. And so, you know, these teachers and these leaders are adapting in unique ways, in ways they hadn't expected to, but that's just the nature of their profession. And I think we can learn from them. We can learn that, you know, when we get thrown into these types of new situations, that we need to adapt and persist. So again, I wanted to thank the panelists for their sharing what they're doing, because I think we all can learn from that. And I want to now talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing, and in conjunction with Fostering Quality Schools as well. I'll give you just a very brief background on the work that I've been doing for over 10 years now, and how and where we are today with this. So I mentioned at the top of our meeting today at this webinar that I am coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin, and that's because I've been working with the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and over 10 years ago, we had a research project that was federally funded that was designed to develop a new type of leadership assessment tool. Traditionally, leadership assessments in schools have focused very specifically on the principal position. And we thought that's not the right way to go about assessing and or supporting leadership. So we utilized a distributed leadership lens to look at how better to assess and support leadership in schools, with the understanding that leadership is not confined to one individual person. So a principal who does incredible work is not necessarily doing every single leadership task that we'd want to see happening in a school. Effective leadership is actually the result of various people in a school who are taking on leadership responsibilities, who are interacting with one another. So if we really want to get a sense of how effective leadership is in a school, we should look at the work that's being done throughout an organization, throughout a school building. And that led us to development of what I mentioned earlier, the Comprehensive Assessment of Leadership for Learning, or CALL. And we developed CALL as part of this research project. And then we thought, you know, now is a great opportunity to turn this into something that schools across the country can use. And it was going well. We've developed different versions of CALL. One is to look specifically at leadership for teaching English language learners. We've developed one for district level leadership. And then this past year, we looked at what we were doing and looked at the state of schools and said, we've got to adapt just like everybody else. We have to be responsive just like everybody else. So we worked and scrambled over the summer to develop a version of CALL that, hopefully I'm not dating myself here, we're calling long distance CALL. And I say that to some of my, my kids, for example, and they say, what do you mean? What do you mean you have to dial a 1? What do you mean it costs extra to make a phone call? Or why do you even make phone calls? Anyway, we call it long distance CALL. And the idea behind it is that we want to assess and support and provide action-oriented data in the remote teaching and learning environment. So I'm gonna share my screen just for a moment here, if that's okay, and just show you where you can learn more about CALL and we're working with Fostering Quality Schools to provide a way to assess where we are, and that's something we've been hearing about. How are things going? What's going on? That's an important question no matter what school context we're in. But given that this is still a very new environment, a very new situation, it's important to assess where we are, get data that we can use right away, and make these changes if necessary to whatever school context we're in. So that's very briefly what CALL is. And again, I want to show you a little bit more about long distance CALL. And we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to invite you to visit at any time to go to the CALL site, leadershipforlearning.org, and you can learn about long distance CALL, among other things. But what we're trying to do, again, is assess leadership practice, provide data that, again, is action-oriented, that people can act on. It's not a reflection of an individual. It is not meant to grade or, call to task what a school is or isn't. It's really meant to provide immediate, targeted data to school leaders across the school so that they can assess where we are and what we could be doing differently. And what one unique aspect of it that we wanted to incorporate was the ability to compare data from the in-person environment to the online or virtual school environment to see what practices have changed based on the school context. You would imagine that most things have changed. And in fact, actually some practices have actually improved. You might be hearing from some schools that teacher collaboration has never been better in the virtual school environment. And so there then becomes an opportunity to say, wow, we've actually found a great way to collaborate as a, more effectively as staff. How do we hold on to that when we actually go back to, the brick and mortar environment? So looking to see where practices have shifted based on how we've changed in our school context, that's something we have within this as well. But ultimately, why we have this tool is that we think school improvement planning, meaningful school improvement planning is vital. And we want that work to continue even as our worlds are constantly changing. So I'm really happy to be working with Melissa and Aurelia and Joe with Fostering Quality Schools, and having this be something that can be used with schools across the country, no matter what context you're in. And I'm happy to share that with you today. So here it is. And I know there's more resources that you can gather after the webinar that you can learn more about this and some other work. And I will always welcome to have further conversations about this as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's such, I love these kinds of tools because it really gives you, just as we were talking about earlier on the panel, just the more information we have to truly understand where folks are is just going to help us get better with our processes as we adjust. And our energy right now and our resources are precious as usual, but more now than ever before, really. And so thinking about better ways to make decisions that you can back up with a little more information, because even though we're living in the virtual and a world surrounded by data, it can be complex and it can be complicated. So thinking about ways to organize that information and really center it on will be best for our students is key, right? Particularly our multilingual English learners, exceptionally abled and culturally diverse students who they're really the students we need to plan for right now and make sure that are part of our worldview and our lens. So that has been a great, an asset to move to this opportunity that we're in right now. It's really time to readjust, right? We should never go back to the old normal. The old normal was inequitable for all of our vulnerable populations. So this is an opportunity to move forward and correct course and really try to be intentional, as each of the panelists mentioned in different ways, that intentionality really needs to play out into actions. And at recognizing the social political contexts regularly, having deeper conversations, bringing in the bigger issues to the classroom, and then support. Some of the resources that we have put out, including our 4-part program, really walk through each of these opportunities that we have, that how to do this work, right? So Joe and I work with district leaders and state leaders to help organize and facilitate how all of this information can be put into a way that benefits students and their families and caregivers. And one of the ways we look at that is to think about how do we support integrated and targeted instruction so that we're moving forward at the grade level. One of the key phrases we like to implement all the time is accelerate, don't remediate, right? So we know that this is also an opportunity to bring students to grade level rigorous work that's rich, that's supported with culturally responsive teaching, as well as social and emotional support, and really develop that agency and independence that students need to move forward. And I think you're right. You know, Dr. Rivers said it before, and all our panelists said that this is an opportunity to really create some independence. And when we have high expectations for our families and for our students, they will meet them. So it's all about this kind of networking, this kind of support, this kind of collegiality, willingness to share and take risks, and then report back on how things are going. So this has been really quite an honor. So myself, Aurelia, thank you so much. You have just been fantastic in facilitating this with us, and we really, really appreciate everybody's time. And thank you for sharing call, because I think any kind of information that we have to organize where we're going and how we're going is vital to the success of our students. So we have a fantastic website. It is fosteringqualityschools.com. And on that website, you can find amazing resources that we have pulled together. We have worked in collaboration with district and school leaders to create. We are available for conversations, and if you need to learn more about what we talked about today, we'll be sending some follow-up information, including a one-pager that it couldn't have been more planned. Some of the things that you said are directly printed on that page, and really thinking about how to engage, how to create the systems that help to communicate and really develop confidence in our families and caregivers to be a part in this, right? Because we cannot do it alone. This is an opportunity for education to really be more collaborative. So those resources are available. You'll be getting a follow-up with an on-demand webinar explaining more about the call system, and you know, some little freebies, an infographic, because we like to do that now. And we want to thank everybody for being here, and all of the guests out there from all the different states. We saw so many different states here on the call with us this evening, and so I really appreciate it, and fostering, on behalf of Fostering Quality Schools and everybody else, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for all the work that you do out there, teachers, administrators, and support people in the participants today. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for coming today, and as we sign off. And I just appreciate your leadership and your commitment to students, and you know, you're my heroes. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I have family there on Long Island, and my daughters are there. So just thank you so much. Thank you for everything. So I guess we could sign off now, right, Melissa? So everyone, and then Dr. Rivers needs to go celebrate.
Yes, happy birthday, Dr. Rivers.
Happy birthday, Dr. Rivers.
Feliz cumpleaños.
Feliz.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Take care.